Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building Bridges to Workforce Development in Florida's Rural Communities. This webinar is brought to you by the Florida College Access Network in partnership with the Consortium for Florida Education Foundations. I'm your FCAN host, Kathy McDonald, Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. For those of you who are new to our work, a little bit of background. FCAN leads the collaborative movement to ensure every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. Our vision is to see a Florida working together where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. We do our work in three primary ways. First is through our local college access networks, which are cross-sector coalitions of leaders that collaborate to remove barriers and provide more support to students for their post-secondary success. Second, we publish research and data on evidence-based practices and policy opportunities to strengthen Florida's talent pool. In addition to policy briefs, we publish resources that you can use in your local community, like our degree attainment one-pagers that can help you determine if you're building a talent-strong Florida locally. And finally, we coordinate 4 College Ready Florida initiatives that provide schools and community organizations free resources to help students continue their education after high school. Now, joining me today as co-host is Mary Chance, who is President and CEO of the Consortium for Florida Education Foundations. Welcome, Mary. And for those that are not familiar with the Consortium's work, can you share a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. And thank you, Kathy. It's exciting to partner on this conversation this afternoon. Our organization serves the education foundations aligned with nearly all of Florida's countywide school districts. And these are nonprofits who are stepping in where perhaps public funding falls short, or where they want to drive some innovation or provide individual support to students and teachers, including in college and career pathway work. So our job is to connect the individuals, organizations, and sometimes financial resources to build their capacity and effectiveness in their local communities. And it is a very diverse state. We have members, a third of our members are working in school districts with less than 10,000 students in the entire county, some with less than 1,000 students in the entire county. And we serve them all, and we are really excited about this opportunity and learning more strategies that are effective in those rural environments. Next slide, Kathy. So in terms of the funds that our folks raise, I just wanted to share this with you quickly. Education foundations raise revenue from a variety of sources, just like other nonprofits. And here's how they spend that money. And I highlighted 2 things here in red that are pertinent to this conversation: college and career readiness, workforce education, often supporting the secondary, middle, and high school career academies and work at the school district level, and then also mentoring, scholarships, career exposure work. So together, those comprise more than 1/3 of the portfolio of work of education foundations in Florida. Next slide. And then what that looks like, just gave you a couple of examples, but it often is stepping in and providing direct connections for students to the world of work through hands-on learning opportunities. As I said, mentoring and other sort of visibility to the world of work, and helping bring teachers opportunity to connect curriculum in the classroom to the outside community. The education foundations are led by board members, and 80% are from their community, their private sector folks. So that provides a nice opportunity to build some bridges between the classroom and the community. And we've been doing some work collaboratively these past 2 years, you're going to hear a little bit about later, particularly in rural communities, in a really wonderful partnership with Florida College Access Network. So happy to learn with you today, and thank you, Kathy, for the introduction. Oh, one last quick thing. For those of you who aren't involved or know who your education foundation is, here's where you go on our website on this Connect Local tab, and they're all listed there alphabetically. by county, and you can click right through to a contact person and contact them to learn a little bit more. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So a couple of housekeeping items as we're getting started here. First, we welcome your questions. We're going to ask, I know many of you are familiar with Zoom. You are Zoom experts now, but instead of putting those into the chat, we're going to ask that you put those into the Q&A, the question box, so that we can keep track of the questions and tee those up when we get to that part of our webinar. Second, please share what you're learning on social media. We love to learn what's resonating with you. You can see both the Consortium's Twitter handle and FCAN's Twitter handle, and please use the hashtag TalentStrongFL so we can find you. Finally, we will be recording today's webinar. We will share the slides in the recording and a link to the reports that the Education Design Lab produced in the key takeaways that will go out usually within a couple of days after the recording. So let's get a quick pulse of who is with us today. If you can share, take that quick poll, if you can just let us know what type of organization you're with so we can understand who we're speaking with today, that would be great. Let's just give that a couple of seconds while people vote. Okay, give that one more second. Great. So a nice mix: college and universities, nonprofits, business and workforce development, and then a smattering of K through 12 career and technical programs, philanthropy, and local government. So great, welcome. Thank you so much to all of you for letting us know who's in the virtual room with us. We appreciate that. And with that, I am thrilled to welcome our guest presenter today, Leslie Doherty. She is the Senior Education Designer with the Education Design Lab. I'm a super big fan of their work. So if they are new to you, I encourage you to subscribe to their e-list. They're always coming up with really interesting innovations in the education space. So specifically with Leslie, she began her higher education career over 17 years ago as an admissions counselor and quickly saw the need to build better pathways for transfer students transitioning from 2 to 4 year programs. This passion provided opportunities to work directly with students to overcome barriers in admission, registration, advising, and completion. Leslie served as the transfer coordinator at Southern Illinois University, go Salukis, where she worked with community colleges to create seamless 2+2 and dual admission programs. She also worked directly on the Department of Labor's Trade Adjustment Assistance Community College and Career Training Grant. That's a mouthful. Her work on this grant included bridging the gap between technical associate degrees and the path to baccalaureate degree attainment. In her first role at the Education Design Lab, she provided support and guidance to the teams selected to participate in the Seamless Transfer Pathway Design Challenge. Leslie's current work includes supporting and leading institutions through various completion initiatives, including working with faculty and administration to build clear, stackable pathways to completion at 2 and 4 year institutions. She also works with institutions interested in implementing human-centered design methodology. Leslie earned a doctorate in higher education leadership, focusing her research on student perception and reverse transfer initiatives, specifically community college transfer students who left the 4 year institution before earning a degree. And with that, Leslie, I am going to stop sharing so that you can share your own slides and take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. And thank you so much for having us here today. I say us, I am just one of many that is working on this Bridges Rural project, and you'll get to hear from Marcy here in a second. And I would just call out, we are really excited to be calling in from Scottsdale, Arizona, today, where we have spent the last 2 days at the Rural College Access and Success Summit here in Scottsdale, with really a focus on college access and post-secondary workforce training with a group of so many other professionals doing this work. So excited to come off of that conference and to be able to have this conversation with you all today. So we'll jump in. As Kathy said, I work at the Education Design Lab, and the Education Design Lab really for the past 2 years has been working on this initiative that we're calling Bridges. And so it's really thinking about how we might build rural innovation, specifically with designing these educational strategies that are focused on the future of post-secondary education training and work. Let's see. There we go. At the lab, we use a human-centered design, or I like to call it a learner-centered design process. And really we do that so that we ensure that the future of whoever we're talking about, their future, that person is in the design process with them. So we really design to co-design tests and build new models and approaches to really address program affordability, relevance, portability, and visibility. So those are really the 4 design pillars of our work in a rapidly changing knowledge economy. So far to date, the lab is 8 years old, and I've been at the lab for 4.5 of those 8, so very excited to be with the lab. We have co-designed and tested new models with over 1,000 colleges, universities, organizations, over 560 employers, and 24 ecosystems. At the lab, we believe, and I'm sure many of you on this call believe this too, that the lines between school and work are blurring. And we really believe that post-secondary institutions are the key to unlocking the skills from degrees to make them more explicit to learners and to the employers that are seeking them. We have 3 buckets of work that we call them at the lab, but really the areas that we're focused on are designing shorter and stackable pathways. Kathy talked about that a little bit, and so that how can we create pathways that are lower cost to degree, completion, whatever that looks like, earn and learn programs, micro-credentials and pathways. We're also working to catalyze the transition to a skills-based hiring. So how do we translate degrees to employer competencies, assessments to test and builds, and really validating micro-credentials with employers, and also training for human-centered design and change management. So we do this at large conferences like we are today at the Rural Summit, and also on institutional campuses, or we do that with employers and organizations as well. So that's just a little bit the areas of our work. We have a design process, and I always say this, yes, we have a process to what we do. And so for the past year, our Bridges 5 rural institutions that I'll talk about here in a second have been following this design process. So it's really 4 phases of the work. It comes from an understand phase to really creating some ideas, testing those models with learners, and then launching full pilots. So all of our institutions have gone through this since January 2021 and are implementing pilots today. We also have 2 other pillars of our design process, and first one is a learner engagement framework. So we have a lot of wonderful research that has really taught us more about self-determination theory. So all the pieces of our work also include how this is impacting a learner's growth, their sense of belonging, and their agency as we are testing approaches and putting solutions out with them. We also use this amazing framework. This is not our framework, and so you can see Equity Meets Design, who is actually based in Florida. So we layer this on too because we believe that we have to understand the historical context. We have racial radical inclusion and the processes product, which requires us to start with ourselves to seed power as we want to speak to the future. So these are really the 3 pillars of how our institutions have gone through this design process in the last year. We are designing post-secondary education with learners. Again, it's a learner-centered design process. So the learners are there, but we're doing that in tandem with institutions, employers, community-based organizations, nonprofits, really all of those, especially in rural places that we know are critical to the vitality of our rural communities. At the lab, we refer to this group as new majority learners as we think about the transition in general from higher education, from that focus on that traditional learning population, that right out of high school 18-year-old. We don't feel like that is the current traditional, right? And also non-traditional perhaps is not quite the word that we'd like to use. So we use new majority learners, and we understand that those new majority learners come from a lot of different identities within this. So they're rural learners, but they're also frontline workers. They're single parents and first generation students. So really all of the work that we do with our learner-centered design lens comes from the experiences of these new majority learners. So that was a little and a lot about the lab. So now I wanted to dive in a little bit more into our Bridges Rural Design Project, which I know is hopefully why a lot of you are here today to learn about the amazing work that our institutions have been doing throughout the last year and a half. So the Rural Project started in April 2020. We actually, I will just say for context, we signed the grant in February 2020 with a whole bunch of different ideas of what we are going to do. And then as we all know, we went into the pandemic, and so things have changed from there. And so we'll talk a little bit about the impact of the pandemic from what we had originally thought about to what has manifested today. So it ends, right? We say ends, but our evaluation ends in June 2023. So it's really almost a 3-year project. We are funded by the Ascendium Education Group. So we're very, very thankful for all of their help and their support as we've been able to jump into this endeavor together with our institutions. So as we start, I like to start all of the times I'm with people to just set the stage that we're all designers. And so when we think about design from whatever and wherever you come from, we have to first really broaden our definition of design and designers. We have to test our assumptions about human beings. We must wonder, who am I excluding? And that really allows the answers to change our solutions, our approaches when we are working with any set of learners, with any circumstances, as we are thinking about helping them co-design their future. At the lab, we always start every project with a design question. And so I'm going to get a little bit more into this design question in a minute, but we started with this question. Collectively, how might we strengthen the capacity of rural community colleges to serve as critical economic growth engines for their learners and their communities? This was really born from the idea that we know that there are so many wonderful things already happening in rural communities, in the rural communities that I grew up in central Illinois and the ones that I still live in southern Illinois. So we know that there are amazing things happening. So how can we come together to really strengthen the capacity of rural community colleges, which we know many people, the many wonderful people working there are deans of 5 different departments and are working multiple jobs. So how do we think about their capacity as they become that critical economic growth engine within their community for their learners and for their communities as a whole? So like I said, we started just diving into the rural learner experience, and the big question, right, that we always talk about is, what is rural? Who is rural? Where is rural? Asking all those questions just so we could better understand all of the different communities that exist within the rural community. We say a lot, rural is not a monolith. We know that different places have different opportunities and also different barriers for their learners. So really digging deeper into that research and that knowledge. And so from there, we brought together in July of 2020, a group of about 25 practitioners, learners, researchers, college presidents, really all of those who were doing just amazing work in rural places, to have that conversation about, this is from the lab's point of view, what we're seeing in rural America. Is this right? What are we missing? So we could ground the experience for our Bridges Rural institutions in some of that early knowledge. From there, we sought out rural community colleges. We wanted to learn more from them on what they were doing. We were very cognizant that we were asking a lot of rural community colleges in the summer of 2020. And so we really wanted to think about how we might narrow down the scope of the community colleges that we were thinking about for this project, because we didn't want to put out a large RFP to ask 100 rural community colleges to apply for something where we're only going to be able to select 5. So we really thought about geography, the diversity of the learners, the diversity of the economic and socioeconomic statuses, and a lot of those areas to think about who might we reach out to about this experience. And from that, we interviewed 13 rural community colleges just to learn more about them, their students, and their capacity. From there, we sent out 9 what we call EOIs, or expression of interest, again, thinking about that key piece of that design question, which is the capacity, and what are we asking for these institutions to provide to us, especially again in the middle of a pandemic. So not a full RFP, but thinking about what is it that interests you about this project, about learning more about your learners, who they are, and the design process. And so from there, we sent out 9 EOIs, and we came these 5 amazing rural community colleges that we've been working with for the past year and a half. So you're going to get to hear from Marcy from Zane State. So we're really excited to have Zane State as a part of our cohort, just down the road from them, about 90 miles. But again, different learner population, different economic impact is Washington State Community College, which is in Ohio. So making sure that we highlight that. We've been working with Eastern Maine Community College in Bangor, Maine, the Finger Lakes Community College in Canandaigua, New York, upstate New York, and also our, they say they're the Western Warriors there, the Idaho Falls, Idaho, the College of Eastern Idaho. So those are the 5 institutions that have really just dove into this design process and have started implementing their learnings for their students here in, again, the last year. I talked a little bit about when we launched this project. We launched it with the idea that we would get to be on these campuses. And of course, that was just something that was not available to us. So we really dug into how we might design virtually with our rural community colleges. And so we used a lot of different technology. We tried a lot of different things. And I really think that, again, we don't talk about the things that, the promises of the pandemic or things that happen. But I think one thing that came out is that there is a way to be able to do this in a more virtual environment that is really more inclusive and invites more people to the table than could have happened if we would have done that on individual campuses. We'll get a little bit to the design insights, but again, having that conversation about trust, what others feel about the community college. So again, I just wanted to highlight this because I think sometimes we talk a lot about broadband and internet access, but this was something that we did almost completely virtually with our community colleges. We also created a community of practice. This is really integral for our work because we know that there are many, many spaces where rural experts and practitioners are talking and learning from each other, but there's not sort of one central place that we can have these conversations. And a lot of us see the same barriers and opportunities for our learners and our communities. So again, a part of the pillar of this design process was really creating a space for others to be able to come in, to talk, to learn from what we were doing, what's working, what's not working, as you are all thinking about your own individual community colleges or your communities that you are trying to serve. So we kicked off in January 2021. This slide is full because it was a lot of things. We'll just call that out. I also am always thinking about, the resources that were put into this work. And so just to let you know, as part of this project, at the very beginning, we had an incentive grant for all of the institutions that were participating, again, recognizing capacity and trying to learn more how we might be able to help when it came to faculty release time or additional grant funding opportunities for our core team members who are part of this engagement. And then with the pilot launch, there was an additional incentive grant at the end to be able to start building some of the pieces that may have had that financial or human resource capital that was needed to get these pilots launched. through all of this, we were really working on these 5 pieces of our bridges, our theory of change. We believed, and this came from, of course, our institutions themselves, the work that we had previously done in rural, and also just from others, within our rural sphere that we went and talked to. And so really our theory of change as we approach this project was that this isn't an opportunity to connect rural scholars and practitioners nationwide. This is also a chance to showcase rural community college as innovative, resourceful, and creative. We know that, and so we wanted to make sure that that was a part of our showcasing. Also, again, that building a national community of practice and producing models that can be adopted by other community colleges. We wanted others to be able to see the things that these institutions were doing and think about how that might be locally validated or how that could work within their own communities. And finally, impacting learners and communities nationwide by just providing more opportunities for people living in rural areas in those areas, right? To think about the spaces and the places that they occupy and how can we bring and continue, right, to think about the strengths in those communities and really empower communities to keep those learners there in their own communities. So that was how we got to our first year. And then we'll talk a little bit about the institutional, the second year, which we were focused on the institution. So a lot of times when we were talking about design and we're talking about bringing together communities, we start with creating a design team. So as a part of this, if you're interested in learning more or thinking about how to do this yourself, we really wanted to highlight that it's bringing together people from all walks of life, people from everywhere within your community. And so really starting with that core design team. Who are, as you think about your potential approach, who are the people that are going to drive this? Who are the people that are there every day? And when you're putting this core design team together, and when we were doing this with the institution, we really wanted to think about how all aspects or all departments of the community college are impacting the learner. So sometimes that means there could be perhaps some, we'll say it's silos in community colleges, but to think about how is your non-credit talking to your credit, right? And how do we bring those people together for this? How are we bringing in communication? How are we bringing in recruitment? How are we thinking about it from the administration lens? And so having all of those voices as part of that core design team. And from there, then thinking about your extended design team. Who else needs to be a part of this process to understand what you're going through, what you're learning, and to be able to be bought in as you are creating solutions? And finally, other stakeholders. Who else in your community needs to be a part of this initial understand phase to learn more from them about what their goals are for their community, their goals are for themselves, so you can, again, capture the voices of everyone within that rural community. Something that is key to this is always ensuring that, again, whose ever future we're talking about is also at the table. So making sure that the rural learner, the rural student is always at the table when you're having any of these conversations. So we started with our institutions in creating that design team and really focusing on who is going to do the day-to-day, who needs to be included in this conversation, and whose voices must be a part of the approaches and the solutions that we are looking for. So through that, we were able to talk to over 450 learners throughout this early understand phase. And again, understanding more about their lived experience, what it is that they wanted for themselves, what is it that they loved about their community, what are some things that they didn't particularly like about their community? Did they feel connected to the community college? Is college something that interests them? And so again, just really trying to understand more that lived experience from that learner and get that voice at the table. In addition to the learners, we talked about the stakeholders, over 650 other stakeholders. And so those were community members. We talked to mayors, we talked to employers, really anyone living within that rural community to, again, ask them questions about what their relationship was like with the rural community college. Did they feel like it was an asset to the area? Would they recommend that students after graduation stayed in that community. Again, just helping us really ground ourselves in how the community was feeling, what the atmosphere was like as we thought about getting into the next phase of our work. From there, we collected all of that information and then we presented it back out to the community and really helped them immerse themselves in their own voices to say, we asked like what were the 3 biggest opportunities as well as the 3 biggest barriers within your communities. And this is what we learned. And so as we go into the next phase of this work, how do we do it from the center of those voices? Again, really thinking about the entire community having an impact on the approaches that the community colleges we're looking to do, again, as we think about growing that local economy. So we had about 400 gallery walk attendees that attended those. And then as you can see, this is a Miro board. Again, we did this all virtually, all of the different feedback and comments that really moved our institutions to start thinking about potential approaches with their pilot. That took us to our ideate phase, which was super fun. It always is. And it really, we asked every community college to come up with 100 ideas. And it was not hard, I will say that, for them to come up with 100 ideas, because there were already things, that came out of the gallery walk that were apparent when it came to understanding students' basic needs. How do we impact with what the employers are telling us that they want? What are those connection points already looking like? So again, coming out with about 100 ideas per institution, some of things that they implemented right away, and some of the things that they are still working on, and then others that really are pushing them into this final phase as they launch their pilots. That also came into our design insights, and I am going to put that link in there for anybody. And so that's a link to our Bridges Rural page where you can download both of these insight briefs. But again, so our first insight brief was really focused on the experience of the learner. And so as our institutions thought about what their work would look like within the next 6 months, they did it from these insights that rural communities demonstrate a deep commitment to place. I recognize that I'm talking to a lot of people from rural communities, so these aren't going to be perhaps huge aha moments, but really can think about as you are thinking about being that catalyst for change within your own community, how might you solve or create approaches with this in mind? Experiences of belonging vary within rural communities. Rural communities benefit from understanding their constituents, and that's all of their constituents. Education may be seen as a value and a threat in rural communities. We need to be thinking about this as we create solutions, and future efforts should be built from the strengths of rural communities with rural community colleges at the center. So that first understand and ideate phase led us to these 5 insights that then took the teams to the next level as we thought about prototyping. So, oops. Did I get that? Yes. So now we're in the prototyping pilot phase. So from there, they created 18 prototypes. And so these were just ideas that had been fleshed out, talked to learners, talked to stakeholders to say, these are the things that we heard you say that were necessary for you as you think about your future goals and your success. And so did we deliver? Did we do this right? And so from these prototypes, all of them were then turned around and retested with that same population of extended stakeholders and the other stakeholders within their communities to ask the question, which often sometimes is missed, is that we ask you how we can help you, and then you tell us, and then we create something different. So what we wanted to do is really root ourselves in what can we do? How can we work together? Then create something to then for the learners themselves to tell us if we hit the mark, if we really were meeting the needs as they express them in that understand phase. So we had another round of feedback where both national, so we brought back that early group of experts and practitioners to have this question to say, is this the right approach moving forward? We worked really on 5 what we called national prototypes. And so these were really the themes that came from those original 18 as we think about how we might impact rural community colleges to be able to test these ideas with their own communities and their learners. So at that time, and as we move on, you can see that our prototypes were around a learn anywhere model, that learners can take courses virtually, hybrid, or in person at community learning sites. So not particularly at the campus, but at community learning sites. And that not only can they take them virtually, hybrid, or in person, but that might change based on that individual learner's experience that week or that month. So that real hybrid experience that lets the learner choose how and when they're going to be able to engage with what else is going on within their personal lives. Also, living local, working global. A lot of our community colleges are already working with large scale companies to offer pathways and certifications. We know this is happening in suburban, urban areas. And again, with that pandemic, there were a lot of jobs that went to that remote. So how can we really think about that as an impact in potential rural areas as they're talking about co-working space or growing their careers? Earn and learn models. And this one, you're going to get to hear a little bit more about here in a second, but this is where employers are funding their learners' education. A lot of times we hear, well, a student has to choose whether or not they're going to go to school or work. We know that for the new majority learners, as we call them, a lot of times that isn't a choice, right? Once you are working, from whenever it is that you can work. So the time that you can get that first job, you're working. So we have to think more creatively about earn and learn opportunities, understanding that our students are going to work. So how can we help them ensure that they're getting that learning piece of it as well, while they can still support their families? And that goes into this community of support. Our learners are asking for support, and they're asking for family-friendly campus resource centers, dedicated advisors. They want to, and we'll see this coming up, they want to see others just like them thriving within their communities. And so building those communities of support are so crucial for not only their time on your campus, but also as they transition into the workforce. So that was a big prototype and thing that we heard from learners. And finally, mobile marketing and training in place where community colleges can send mobile classrooms. They can, put a vehicle together that has all of, has iPads, has access to financial aid resources, and we take that to our more rural and remote areas. Talk a little bit more about the College of Eastern Idaho. Their service area is the size of New Hampshire. They have students that live 3.5 hours away from their Idaho Fall campus. So we need to think more strategically about how we serve those in the more remote and rural areas of our service area, especially those who don't have access to reliable transportation, do not have access perhaps to the broadband that we are asking them to do. So really thinking about mobile marketing and train in place initiatives. That's our next insights brief, which is thinking about, as you are, again, thinking about those first insights about the rural learner, how are we thinking about future efforts and what we are seeing that has really excited rural learners and has really excited rural communities as they think about creating more opportunities for their learners. So the first one we talked about, this future effort should include a greater understanding of the diversity of learners within each rural community. So we have communities, we have sub-communities, but really understanding the needs and the diversity of the entire, your entire learning service area. Flexible learning options are essential to rural learners. This was another piece of this that I think was really impactful, and I can see as you're thinking about Florida, a lot of it was on seasonal work. Right? We know, especially in rural areas, that sometimes our work is seasonal. So how do we think about flexible learning with that lens as well? We need more work-based learning opportunities, and they are just critical to increasing that rural learner success. Rural community colleges can be the trusted hubs to drive that economic mobility, and marketing and outreach, again, has to be targeted to those subregions. So you can see that a lot of these were fed from those national prototypes as well. So I am going to jump into talking a little bit more about the pilots that have just launched, which are really exciting. And so we're going to jump into Washington State. So Washington State Community College in Ohio, always good, in the Mid-Ohio Valley, right on the river there, is it the Ohio River? Thank you, the Ohio River, and with West Virginia right on the other side. So they are a border state as well. So again, as we think about those insights, they were really focusing on that they needed to have a greater understanding of the diversity of learners within each of their rural communities. And so they launched a Strive for 5, which launched in January 22, where each learner, again, as we think about those communities of focus and support, was assigned a student support coach who met with them 5 times throughout the semester to ensure that they were making progress towards their goals. From that, I will say that this was an iteration of an earlier pilot. They put out a pilot that they were hoping to have 25 learners join in January, and they had 1 learner register for their pilot. And so they knew then that they needed to take a switch and really think about what they were communicating to learners, what it looked like, why were learners not interested in this. And it came to this interesting observation that came from their community as they were thinking about evening classes and pairing that with childcare. And so with that, they really found out that not only was there not evening childcare at Washington State, who does not have childcare, but there was no access to evening childcare in their entire service area. So not only was this impacting when students could go to school or if they could take night classes, but this is also impacting shift work and really the opportunities for single parents in their entire service area when it came to being able to be in some of these jobs. So they instead have now moved Strive for 5 into Evening Advantage. So it's still at night and launching in 2022. But what it includes, and again, we talked a little bit about the resources that Ascendium was able to provide as part of this, but it includes free tuition, books, and it also includes free high quality childcare. Now that comes from reaching out, talking to those in their communities, working with their jobs and family services, their boys and girls clubs. We've seen this in other places with YMCAs, to having that conversation to say, how do we meet the needs of single parents, not only those that are attending our institution, but others in the community that might need access to this evening childcare. And so they're launching within 3 different pathways that were born from this advanced manufacturing and integration pathway that you can see here, which is really a stackable way for a learner to be able to take a course. And this is already actually needs to be updated within the last 3 weeks because they have moved this into entirely 8-week courses. So that way a student can get into a pathway within 8 weeks, have a certification, and be able to find a family sustaining wage with the option of then coming back for that next credential or simply staying in the workforce. So again, lots of amazing things coming out of Washington State, but it was really grounded from understanding the needs of their learners and flipping the script a little bit to say, we've offered all of these evening classes and students don't want them, to ask the question, what are the barriers for our students to be able to take evening classes, and then solving and creating solutions from there. We also have the Finger Lakes Community College. So the Finger Lakes Community College came up, as you can see, we like our acronyms here. So our GRIT, which is Growing Rural Infrastructure Together. But this again was coming a lot of with what Washington State saw as well, is industry-driven micro pathways that provide opportunity, access, and advancement really early on within that student's journey, but also place-based in where they were living. Finger Lakes also has a large service area, and it's just really, students are unable with transportation costs and those barriers to always make that trek to Canandaigua when we're asking them to do it daily, weekly, whatever that looks like. They're really looking for opportunities within their community, within their own communities. And so they were focused on adults who are unemployed or underemployed and have those low incomes that are facing that transportation and those technology barriers. So they were able to launch, again, you'll see this micro pathway, a full cohort, and I always want to call out that full for them means if we're thinking about, so I've worked in higher ed for a while here, as we're thinking about, course capacity and what does it mean if a course makes it or not. So a full cohort is a class that involves students that are in person at 2 different locations, students who are completely online and students that are hybrid and can choose where they're going. So again, that is what one cohort looks like. So they really helped stretch the idea of what we're talking about when it comes to course capacity. It has a lot of students who are currently unemployed within their service area, as well as those looking to upskill. It's about half and half of students who are currently unemployed and those who are currently working, but we're hoping to upskill to get to that next level. They have 2 initial learning sites in their area for the Certified Production Technician micropathway. So those are 2 of their most rural areas, again, within their service area. And they have actually already secured additional funding. They had over 20 different sites. So when we were looking at sites, we were looking from everywhere from a local library. Could we be doing this at the K-12 level? Where do the learners want to go and receive that learning? And so they have additional funding and are going to expand to at least 3 more learning sites already this fall. The next one is Eastern Maine Community College up in Bangor, Maine. And so in Maine, again, as they were diving into the trust within rural community colleges, they saw a big disconnect, especially during the pandemic, from those who had graduated or had not graduated from high school and making that transition into post-secondary education and training. So they created Destination U, which is a free 8-week course. This is a very early iteration of this, and I'll talk about this here in a second, but that really connects learners to understanding who are the employers in the area. What sort of skills are they looking for? Is this something I'm even interested in? What is the timeline to be able to do this? And so really helping the learners themselves set goals about what they wanted their future to look like, and then integrating what that meant as they stayed in their local communities. Again, this was adults of all ages in the communities of Bangor, but also their more remote areas. And this led to a couple different things. Learning that the first cohort felt like 8 weeks was too long. So that was a learning. And also they felt that they were in different pieces of the curriculum. So right now they are dissecting that curriculum to see how they can make it more free flowing for adults to be able to express where they are or where they feel they are in that curriculum and to complete from there. I also learned that it was great that the wonderful facilitators at Eastern Maine Community College were doing this for them, but that they would feel more comfortable if somebody from their own community was the facilitator of these trainings. So they took a little bit of a turn and are now working with 20 local community members throughout their service area to train them to be able to facilitate this, what they're calling Opportunity Ready or Destination U. They also talked to the Katahdin region, which has a large number of unemployed males, and they were working to reestablish this outdoor recreation tourism as they again see tourism sort of coming back, hopefully, as we think about the next phase of this pandemic. And so really working with those local employers to connect those underemployed males to, again, stackable pathways that could get them into the door of their next job within 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm going to do a quick deep dive on the College of Eastern Idaho. So the College of Eastern Idaho, like I said, they are our representation of the West, as they like to say that, and they are West. They are the rural West, and just amazing group of practitioners and learners. I will say Eastern Idaho is also only 4 years old. So they were a technical college up till 4 years ago and just expanded to a community college. There are only 4 community colleges within the state of Idaho. So as you can imagine, and like I said earlier, they have a very, very large geographic area. So with the College of Eastern Idaho, as they were thinking about initially the approach and the solution when it came to being that economic engine of growth, they quickly found out from their learners that within the Idaho Falls area that they do a pretty great job. But when they started hearing more from their learners in those more rural and remote communities, and we're going to talk a little bit about Driggs in the Teton Valley, that those communities really felt disconnected. They really didn't understand what the College of Eastern Idaho was there for, what they were doing, or even that they were a part of their service area. So this first graph that came from an additional survey that we did specifically in Driggs in the Teton Valley asked, do you think that there is access to post-secondary training in your community after high school? And 91, I mean, we can round there, right? 92% of their community members said no, that they did not feel that there was access to adequate post-secondary education and training opportunities within their communities. And so they dug a little bit deeper to learn more about what that meant. And what they learned is that it was really important to schedule and locate programs that were going to balance out learner and employer needs. That hybrid courses is what they were asking for. They needed more flexible learning opportunities, and again, the flexibility of seasonality within their work, and that each local community needs to be learned from, considered, and connected with to build that trust. Again, the College of Eastern Idaho had reached out on several occasions to this community to say, what sort of training do you want? They would answer back, and then perhaps it would just go back to that traditional mental model of let's offer an English 101 class, when the reality of this area is that due to the pandemic, they had an influx of people, I'm sure that you have all heard this as well, moving to this area, and that there was a very large housing shortage, which meant there was an increase in construction jobs available within the valley. So they really wanted to focus on that, acknowledging that they cannot fix the housing shortage, but they can help really think about how they can empower those learners within that community to be able to get to those high quality construction trade jobs that will lead to that family sustaining wage. Another thing that they asked the employers in the area was, would you be willing to train our learners on the job? Like, if you would be able to, as you employ them, are you willing for us to be able to provide trainings to them during their work hours, right? Not separate, not thinking about, after you work 40, let's say 60, right? 80 hours a week as we think about construction, then take classes. Would you be willing to have them trained on the job? And again, almost 67% of those employers said yes. So again, it was thinking about how do you think about that with a curriculum structure with stackable pathways that are co-designed with the employers, and that the local employers overwhelmingly wanted their employees to continue their education, but they didn't feel like they had the resources to fund that. So how can we work together and think about different models? They also, as part of this initial survey, they had some census data that looked a little bit different, as you can imagine, from the data coming from the high school, but that 37% of Teton Valley High School students are Hispanic or Latinx. So again, as part of that continuation of that understand phase, they came to the realization that if they are really trying to capture every voice in their community, they can't capture it with just an English only survey. So they sent out information in Spanish so they could better capture the barriers of that community that they did not feel that they were reaching, and really think about what does that mean with the diversity of their own faculty? What does that mean with the diversity of local employers? And one of the really, I think, exciting things that has come out of this is this co-learning experience where the employers are asking to be able to take some Spanish business courses so they can converse with their students while their students are also employed with them and perhaps pursuing options for themselves in ESL. All of this led to the construction combine. So last Tuesday, is that little over a week ago. So this actually launched on Wednesday last week, that we were invited to come to the College of Eastern Idaho's construction combine. So this is, again, working with the local community, understanding the direct employment needs when it came to construction, working with their local high school, and excuse me, also working with others in their community that had unemployed or underemployed learners to think about how might we create an event where you could learn a little bit about all of the different construction trades that are available for jobs in your area. So we had 32 local high school kids attend. That's a huge number in a small rural area. And they spent the first day learning about different trades that might interest them. So anything from concrete, framing, electrical, drywall. And then the second day of that, so it's a 2-day event, they built 4 sheds. So the students themselves felt that, as we talk about the learner engagement, that agency within themselves to actually build these amazing sheds that were then donated to 3 local veterans and also 1 for the high school, so they can continue to tell the story of what these high school students and local community members did. This didn't happen right by itself with just the College of Eastern Idaho. They had local contractors that donated their time. The mayor was there, again, CEI faculty, staff, and community members. All of the learning that happened was volunteer from the contractors. They also received all of the supplies, again, from local businesses that were really invested in this community being able to compete in this, or to be able to have this opportunity. From that, I think anyone that was old enough to work, I say that because we had everybody from a freshman right to somebody who had been disconnected for 3 or 4 years from the high school, were hired for summer jobs. And from that conversation, especially those that were seniors, they were already talking about, after summer, what does an apprenticeship look like? How can we talk to the College of Eastern Idaho about those earn and learn pathways, to think about what are your other goals? Maybe construction isn't your final goal, and maybe this is just, one of those paths that can help you get there. So it really offered some really authentic job relevant skill building, and also that connection to their local employer. So it was a really cool event, and we are very, very excited to be a part of the Construction Combine. But again, as we talk about bridges and we talk about the design experience, this came from, again, just trying to learn more about their local community. What did they want for themselves? What were their hopes and goals for their learners? And how did they see that big picture as they think about the future of Driggs and the Teton Valley? And for the College of Eastern Idaho, thinking about, okay, so how might we take something like this to another one of our communities? And maybe construction isn't the trade of choice, maybe it's healthcare. And so how can we work, again, with our local community to show those living in our community all of the amazing opportunities that are available to them, but put it together in a way that is accessible and that they can see that future for themselves as well. So what's next? We have some future design questions. So we're thinking about how we can expand the current pilots and prototypes, and I'd love to talk to any of you about how you might see yourself within there. We're also talking about how we could be a convener for other rural programs. We know that these 5 institutions are doing amazing things, but they're not the only amazing rural institutions out there. So how can we continue to learn from others in this space, and how can we continue to facilitate that capacity building? We know that is so important as we become more intentional in building those employer and community partnerships. So from that, I guess I always like to leave with a little bit of an action item for those. So I'll ask those who are on the call today for a little bit of action item as you think about co-designing rural Florida within your own communities and your own context. So I talked a little bit before about our how might we questions. And so again, on your local context, when we put together how might we questions, we do that because it doesn't, we don't talk about the solutions before we actually ask the questions. And so structuring a question like this really helps us explore. So we ask how, so that suggests that we don't yet have the answer. Sometimes that's kind of hard for us, but we have to do that. And it allows us to consider multiple avenues for innovation and reinforces that we're still exploring, right? So early in this process, this is the exploration. So how? my emphasize is that there are many different paths that we can go down when we're thinking about solutions. So it allows for open-minded creativity, brainstorming, and again, bringing in different voices that perhaps had not been at the table before. And we immediately for us brings in the idea of teamwork. We talk about co-design, right? We should all work collaboratively to come up with this joint understanding of the problem, the barrier, or the opportunity, and put our heads together to come up with a testable approach that we then take to the next level of our design work. So I'm just gonna put this out there for you. You have our insights brief. So as you think about the insights that came from that understand phase and learning more about our communities, as well as our second set that really pushed our institutions to think about approaches as they were creating these pilots, I'm asking you. So as a community member, as somebody from the K-12, a nonprofit, all of the wonderful places that you earlier said that you represented, how might you strengthen the capacity of rural Florida communities to serve as that critical economic growth engine for their learners? So turning that a little bit back on you, we were not in Florida, right? We need to learn more about that rural context. You have that information. You have the ability to go and talk to those learners, to those community members, and to start this conversation. So how might you do that as you think about rural Florida? And so I always like to put this up there, and again, we'll share this, but thinking about how might, like, who are you co-designing with? And then identify the barrier, the opportunity, identify the impact. What are you hoping to do? And who is it that you are, designing with and for? So again, thank you so much for this time together. I really enjoyed telling you a little bit more about the work of our amazing 5 rural community colleges that I know you're going to get to hear from Zane State directly. So I'm super excited about that. If you have questions, comments, anything ever, we are always open to that. And again, just thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Leslie. A lot for us to ponder, for sure. So thank you for that, comprehensive and yet quick overview of all that went into the rural cohort that you are working on. So next, let me introduce briefly Marcy Moore, who is the Dean of Business Engineering and Information Technologies at Zane State College in Zanesville, Ohio. Marcy has been with Zane State since 1999, holding staff and faculty positions. Marcy grew up in Zanesville and is a graduate of Zane State, starting there immediately following high school graduation. She earned a bachelor's degree from Franklin University, a master's degree from Muskingum. You'll have to, hopefully I didn't butcher that too bad, University, and is ABD from the University of Maryland Global Campus. Marcy has been involved in projects at Zane State, including Guided Pathways, Achieving the Dream Team Lead, and is an Ohio Association of Community College Equity Champion. With that, Marcy, I'm thrilled to turn the floor over to you to share a little bit about what you learned participating in this cohort.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Zane State College itself. We are located in Southeast Ohio. We have 3 official service counties. The state of Ohio map that I put up here is a map that shows you all 88 counties that we have. We're down in the southeast side. Our college serves roughly 2,000 students, and half of those are what Ohio calls college credit plus students, but those are what Florida, I believe, calls dual enrollment students. They're high school students who take college classes either on our campus or at their high school campus. Our area has seen a significant population decrease. People just are not manufacturing children anymore, and the population is aging and people are moving out of our rural area. I also did want to mention that roughly 50% of our students are Pell eligible. So while we are not necessarily racially diverse, we have a lot of socioeconomic issues in our 3 service areas. But we do actually have students come to us from about 20 different counties that sort of Touch Muskingum County. Oh, by the way, Kathy, it's Muskingum University. You did a great job. You did a really, really, really great job with that. So we have students that come from counties that touch Muskingum County and spread out just a little place around there. So I want to talk about the bridges work that we did. And Leslie did an excellent job giving you a high level overview of the process. And probably at times while you were listening to her, you were like, I don't understand what she's even saying. And so I'm going to break down, I hope, I'm going to take what she's talked about and take it down to a more granular level about what we did at the college. But the major thing was in January of 2021, we had our first initial meeting with our partners at the lab. And we got off of that meeting, a virtual meeting, and we all just kind of looked at each other like, what in the world is going on? And a colleague of mine coined the phrase, trust the process. They know what they're doing. We will figure this out. And I was like, you're right, we will. So we started with biweekly calls. We do that. We have been very faithful with those biweekly calls. And we did some surveys. So we gathered a whole bunch of data, and then we did a gallery walk. And so the surveys that the lab helped us design, we had 3 different ones. One was geared toward the students, one was geared toward employees, and one was geared toward our community members. In that survey, people could volunteer to do a follow-up interview with a member of the lab. They got paid, students got paid to do it. So, it kind of helps to give them a gift card or something for their time. What was important with that is, of course, that learner voice, the voice of the people that the college is trying to serve. And then the results from the surveys and the interviews informed the gallery walk that we did. So the gallery walk, we had 3 different ones. We had 3 different galleries, but they were all in the same gallery walk. So we had one gallery that focused on learners and their experiences with our campus. We had one that focused on employment and the economy. And then we had one that focused on our community and our region as a whole. So we invited, I can't even tell you how many people to participate in this gallery walk. And it was virtual, of course. So we felt that that was a great way to do it, because the participants didn't have to take a day off work or spend time driving to campus to do it. They could do it from their offices or their homes. And so they got to go through those galleries and they answered specific questions to give us feedback on what they saw. And we had quite a few people attend that. So from the gallery walk, we had some themes that came out. And one of the cool things is when you're asking your community, what are our assets? Like, they're going to tell you what your assets are. And so that helps you to feel really good about yourself and really good about your organization. We also learned about barriers for our learners. How many times has somebody said, I don't know how I'm going to get to class, or I don't know how I'm going to get to X, Y, or Z because I don't have a car or I don't have gas. So we learned about different barriers. We also learned, we kind of knew this, we had an assumption beforehand, but we have a deficit mindset in our community, definitely about higher education, but also just a very negative view of, well, there's nothing for us here. There's nothing that our community offers us. And so it was really interesting for us to see those who participated who have a positive feeling about our community, and then those who participated who have a negative feeling about our community. Talking about one of our greatest assets is our green space. And that was just an odd thing for some of us to say, oh, we hadn't really thought about that before. We also learned about our faculty and staff experiences, of course, DEI and belonging. What do our learners actually hope for their future when they leave Zane State or any type of higher education? What about our local employment? And then, do our programs that we offer at the college actually align with our community needs? So we talked to 250 stakeholders, and we had 80 gallery walk attendees. So you can see Leslie had her slide, she had quite a bit of different Post-it notes. And this is a Miro board for those of you who are interested in this. It's a really cool app. We all learned how to make sticky notes virtually. It's been a great fun. And then we had 200 different gallery reflections, but then we were able to, pull the themes from. So then we started our ideation phase, and we came up with some big ideas. And the cool part about the big ideas was anything was possible. There were no bad ideas. There were no no's. You just threw it out. And then we just kind of started talking and spitballing, if you will, to try to figure out how to make it work. So one of the first ideas we had was to create an earn and learn model, a chance for students to earn a living wage while attending college. Our second big idea was to transform Zane State College into a work college. So students would work at the college in exchange for tuition. This could also be a revenue stream for us. And it might help us to fill some staffing needs that we have, obviously. The third big idea was to incorporate FFA, or Future Farmers of America, and invite them to our campus to create community gardens, to have sustainable food, to provide food for our culinary arts program, and we could have the students lead this actual project. We also had an idea to do a single parent one-stop to provide holistic support to our single parents. And some of the support services we discussed were on-site laundry services, delivery services. So some of you might live in an area with an Amazon hub. I've never heard of such a thing until my son moved to an apartment, and their Amazon packages get delivered to this hub, and they go and scan their barcode, and it just magically opens one of the doors and they get their packages. But that's the kind of hub we were thinking about. You can have your Amazon stuff delivered here. You could have your groceries delivered here. We'll go out and pick up your groceries from the click list, or the Kroger app or whatever. And then we'd also have clothing and food pantries on campus. Then we talked about maybe an Appalachian Arts College. So to bring back and celebrate the culture of Appalachia. We have a site in Cambridge, which is about 30 minutes east of our main campus. And it's kind of an empty building, 2 empty buildings at this point. And so we thought about, as a way to use our existing resources, use our existing facilities, we could bring in like blacksmithing and different things like that. And then we wanted to talk about recreation and engagement opportunities. And we thought, a few years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and we had this giant celebration on campus. And our community wants us to continue to host one of those every year. And so how can we recreate that, but maybe on a smaller scale, and get more people involved? So that was another idea. So we had some quick and easy ideas. Student club expansion. These mostly came from our students. We had to be the voice, the leader in our community about DEI, to partner with recovery services. Our portion of Ohio, unfortunately, is battling the opioid epidemic quite severely right now. And so we're trying to think about ways to help people out of recovery. Early engagement with local children, improving our green spaces on campus. I think we're going to install a Frisbee golf course. Promote tourism opportunities. So we're starting to partner up with our Convention and Visitors Bureau just on some idea sharing and brainstorming. And then developing our meaningful community partnerships for our employees. So we had 2 prototypes. One was the Earn and Learn, and one was our Learner Resource Center. And so we had a local convening, or we had an in-person convening last July, where we went to Maine, all 5 community colleges, and we went through, we got feedback, and we kept making changes to our prototypes. And so while we were there, we had to choose one that we brought back, and we chose the Earn and Learn model. So essentially, in a nutshell, students get an industry-related job where they're paid while taking classes. And this piece about hired directly upon completion, sometimes they're going to be hired anyway. So it's not necessarily, it's a temporary thing. The employers that we're talking with now are like, we're just going to hire them now and get this ball rolling. So they're going to attend classes 2 days a week, work 3. The employer will agree not to call somebody in on a school day. The student will agree to go to work. The student will agree to come to class. So we're focusing on adults who are underemployed, unemployed, or have low incomes. So it's a really fun project. So our first pilot that we launched in January was with our accounting students. And the reason, I'm going to be very transparent, the reason that we chose accounting was because the accounting students have in their second spring semester a forced class, a practicum. So they have to take their practicum class, tax season, all that fun stuff. So they go to school 2 days a week. They work the other 3, but they really have helped give us some feedback, about things that work for their schedule, that work with them getting jobs. They're all paid jobs, by the way. So all of our accounting students were successful in obtaining a paid job. One of the things that we got from Ascendium was an incentive grant. And so when I wrote the grant to get our funding, I asked for some funding for gift cards for the gas station and some other just funding things like with textbooks and some help with tuition and that sort of thing that we're going to start launching in the fall. But our accounting students have benefited with the $50 gas card every week for this whole semester. So, and we didn't know at the time that, gas was going to be as expensive as it is today when we did this. So we held an employer luncheon last month, and we had representatives there who were very vocal about needing people in their manufacturing sector, law enforcement, healthcare, and then of course, general business. The one thing from manufacturing though, was that they need industrial maintenance people. And we just closed our industrial maintenance program 2 years ago because we had no enrollment. So that gave me an opportunity to talk to our local employers and say, I need your help. I'm happy to offer the classes. I'm happy to fill your workforce needs, but I need your help to help me recruit these potential employees for you, learners for me. I need your help to guarantee them a job, to guarantee them benefits, to guarantee them tuition reimbursement. And so that conversation is ongoing right now. I did want to say one thing that we've been very blessed with is strong partnerships. And we're only getting better at strengthening these partnerships. And that has been a major word that we have been using all throughout this process. So I encourage you, if you have not already developed a partnership or relationship with your local chamber, with your local Office of Job and Family Services. We have an organization called Ohio SE that is focused heavily on workforce development, economic development boards, your college's board of trustees. Our college board has been involved in this project since the get-go. I have now made 4 official presentations to the board of trustees in the past 18 months. And mind you, we only meet 6 times a year or something like that. But they are very heavily invested and engaged in this work. And, some of them work, some of them do not work, but they're out there talking to people in our community and getting support built up for this. So, we talked when we were planning for this about collective impact and collective leadership. And so, you need these partners to help get things done. And so I strongly encourage that conversation. So the next step that we have is to identify the employers, identify the programs that we're going to launch with and get those firmed up, and then launch this in fall of 2022. We have some curriculum modifications to make, particularly if we want to bring back our industrial maintenance program. And then we also have had a major exciting announcement in the state of Ohio that Intel is coming. They're building fabs 30 miles from my campus. And so we're working on how we can start to help our the incoming new employer, but then also help our current employers backfill positions on people, because people, will probably try to leave and go work for the new company. And then of course, we're always having open conversations with our local employers and everyone else. Okay, so
Marcy.
yes.
Thank you. So one of the questions that came in briefly while you were talking, since you were talking about partnerships, is are you working with your local workforce development board?
Yes, we are.
Do you
Yes.
want to talk a little bit about?
They've been invited with every conversation that we've had. So they've been invited to all of our gallery walks and to our luncheons. We also have specific advisory boards for all of our programs that, you know, can they're made up of people who are graduates of that program and or employed in those fields or own companies in those fields. And so we're bringing them on it and we're involving them also. They were all invited to participate in the gallery walks. Specifically, Chamber of Commerce, I've bragged about our mayor in our city. He has so much energy and, you know, he's really pushing people to really think big and how we can really get back to being, you know, the town that maybe we were 20 years ago, before some companies moved out and before we started learning about what drugs will do to your organization. But yes, they are heavily involved with us.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
that. And thanks for giving us that example of what the early stages of this process look like. Now with that, I want to make sure I bring back in Tracy Berger, who's Director of Member Development for the Consortium of Florida Education Foundations, because you all have been leading a cohort among rural communities in Florida, and we're excited to hear what you're learning.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks for having us here today. I just want to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the K through 12 space here in Florida, an initiative that we really began, launched in the late 2020 with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, called Building College and Career Readiness Cultures in Rural Communities in Florida, a mouthful. This is just a snapshot from our website that you can go to and find a little more information, but I'm just going to give you an overview now. We had worked with the Gates Foundation previously with teacher leadership programs, and they came to us and wondered if we could, knowing that we connect with education foundations all over the state, both rural and urban and everything in between, to see if we could really kind of focus on post-secondary success in that K through 12 space through our education foundations. And the program goals, there we go. Program goals were really to build the knowledge and awareness of the value of different solutions as pathways, post-secondary pathways for students, to build that understanding among the community, among the districts, among everybody involved in their community for students. Wanted to create more advocates for post-secondary student success, again, among the community, and get people to really promote that with students and in their district. We wanted to share the strategies among rural participants and get them to share with each other, because as I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, different shared kind of obstacles that they face with working with in this area and their communities. We wanted to bring FCAN in because they have some great initiatives and can work in rural communities, and wanted to showcase what tools and resources that they had that could be of value to our rural members. And also identify and share, you know, kind of best practices from colleagues around Florida in other more urban districts that were doing great work in post-secondary and college and career readiness work. And so we had we have some peers, which I'll talk about in a minute, that came alongside these rural communities to really help them build and grow their initiatives and work in this area, and create a community culture for collective impact as much as they could. So briefly, what we know about rural Florida: this is a heat map of degree attainment rates in Florida, and the catched areas are more rural districts with fewer than 11,000 students. Now, 11,000 is not a magic number. It's just kind of what we knew about our rural communities and foundations and their capacity for doing things. So that was our cutoff. So you can see the degree attainment rates a little lower in those rural areas. Same with Fafsa completion rates, generally a little lower in the rural areas. And then this one's a free and reduced lunch rate. So not as clear, but many of the rural areas have higher free and reduced lunch rates. We also know that, we've learned through this initiative that the rural communities struggle with a lot of things. They don't really have a college going culture. Maybe it's because a lot of students are first generation college. And so it's not talked about a lot, maybe in their families or generally in the community. The funding is as you can know from the, lower wealth in the communities, the funding is not there. There's no really local champion that can really take on this work. There's no bench. I like that from Kathy, who shared that term with us a few months ago about they just don't have the bench. There's in one community, a student counselor actually was gone for 4 months of the year, the one student counselor in the one high school. That's big when you're trying to get students to graduate on time and get all the credits. And how do you work with that when there's nobody else to pick up that slack when somebody else leaves? District staff turnover, just the capacity of the people, people are volunteers and people are doing a lot of different things in the community, the same people. But the opportunities are there as well. You can engage all the students. For example, in our Glades community, they have like 55 high school seniors. You can really touch all those seniors with an initiative. You can work one-on-one with them, so you can really have a big impact. The scholarship programs that rural communities bring are really valuable to their students and their families. Everybody knows everybody, and the local industry partners, they know each other and they know what they work on, they know what they need, and so they can really work together with their schools to build something strong. So to participate in this program, we knew we needed a few things from our rural foundations. 25% of our foundations are volunteer driven. They don't have paid staff. So we knew we needed a person in that foundation, someone who's paid at least part-time to really be a go-to person to really kind of get things done rather than a volunteer leader. We knew we needed to have some sort of interest or first steps in this area that they were doing, maybe like a scholarship program or a career and college readiness interest, or doing some work with Fafsa already. So you can see from this map, I won't go into detail, but our Levy, Hardy, Okeechobee, and Glades education foundations we decided to work with them because they had something in place already and they were interested in building something strong in their community. And then the Pinellas, Sarasota, and Collier education foundations came alongside as peers because they have strong programs already and knew what they were doing, had some time and efforts that they had seen success in. So they've been good at walking alongside the rural folks. So quickly, program expectations of our rural participants, they needed to form a local team. We didn't want to just work with Education Foundation. They really needed to bring in the school leaders, school counselors, community and industry partners, foundation leaders, but also college and economic development folks. And so we required them to form a local team of folks in that space to really bring this on and understand what's going on and how all of these folks can connect to make this a successful program. They were required to participate in a learning community, which meets about every 6 weeks to, again, learn from each other, share their struggles and challenges and successes, and learn from their peers. And of course, they had to manage grant funding. The peer foundations, again, act as a supportive one-on-one coach for engagement, share their experiences, really share ideas. It's been a really idea generating program for our rural folks, and they had to participate in a learning community as well. And here are some of the topics that the learning community covered, really robust conversations, tackling the summer melt and how to, the FAFSA challenge, what FCAN provides, a lot of resources there. And sharing from other districts as well as how they grew kind of a grassroots effort in college and career readiness. And I just wanted to show you this map, if you will, from our Hardy member who took this upon themselves. I believe they kind of copied it from our Collier member, just having a pathway plan to share with themselves and their leaders, but also students and families, so that they know, yes, we're doing a kickoff rally, yes, we're doing a FAFSA night, but there's so many more steps, and to get them excited about their path to graduating and doing something after college and after high school. So we're learning lots of things that sharing successes and challenges matters, like bridges, like Leslie said, the national community of practice. It's kind of like that, really sharing what each other are learning, learning from the peers matters so very much. And learning in the trenches is crucial. The importance of Fafsa and how to support students, that's been a big learning curve among our folks. And how to do that. It's not a one and done Fafsa night and everybody's going to be successful and all the students are going to complete it on time, et cetera. It's really difficult to move the Fafsa needle, but also that community relationships matter so much, and not they can't do it themselves, and that they're relying on each other, but making those relationships with their college and even with in their district, that they work so closely with other initiatives. Those are really important, and that's been kind of a key to success here. And I know we're kind of running out of time, but that's kind of our initiative in a thimble. So I'll leave it back to Kathy to wrap this up.
Great, thanks, Tracy. Yes, I am so grateful to you and Mary and the Consortium of Florida Education Foundations for partnering with us on, really helping us understand where the opportunities are to help our rural communities that have so much going for them. And as Mary loves to say, rural communities are having a moment. They are, I think a lot of people are taking a second look at how they can take advantage of the quality of life in a rural community where, while still providing opportunities for their young people to grow and thrive and come back to their communities. So with that, I am going to wrap us up. For those of you, if you're not already registered for the Talent Strong Florida Summit, I'm going to make a quick plug for that. It is in 2 short weeks where, similar to the sharing and learning from others that you heard today, we will be doing more of that at the summit. Mary and Tracy will be there. So if you want to connect directly with them and learn more about the rural cohort and maybe how to get involved next time, I'm sure they would love to connect with you. With that, I am going to wrap us up. You know where to find us if you have additional questions, but many thanks to Leslie and Marcy as well for sharing. It was a lot that they have already learned, and I encourage you, if you're not already signed up for their e-blast, to do so that as more updates come out, you will make sure you stay on top of what they're learning through this process. So thank you, Leslie and Marcy, and thank you, Mary and Tracy. It's been a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.